Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's TIA live stream, Savvy 3PLs Finding New Capacity to Combat ELP Enforcement. My name is Anthony. I am the Senior Manager of Education at TIA, as well as the host for today's Lunch and Learn live stream. We first up want to thank you for joining us. And then next, we want to thank our sponsor, DAT, for helping present the webinar today. First, we will get through a little shout out from our sponsor, and we will be playing that video now, and then we will get into further housekeeping. Thank you.
Freight isn't static, it's dynamic. It evolves. Today, freight brokers have more on the line, and they need to act faster than ever before. Rates move, capacity shifts, and customer expectations never slow down. That's why, for decades, brokers have trusted DAT. Now, we're evolving to serve you better. We've brought together innovative companies and brilliant minds obsessed with solving broker problems. And we've accelerated how quickly ideas become products, all to create a one-stop shop for trusted capacity, automation, and real-time insights. That means the largest, most secure carrier network in freight. It means full visibility to give your customers peace of mind. It means simplified execution to keep pace with a fast-moving industry, and real-time market insights to anticipate changes before they happen. DAT Freight and Analytics. We take the uncertainty out of freight.
All right. Again, thank you for the sponsor for today's live stream, DAT Freight and Analytics. Moving on, we will start off with the TIA antitrust statement. Discussion, comments, and presentations during TIA functions must not refer to any past, present, or future rates, prices, or anything related thereto, include any reference to marketing strategies, include any discussion of boycotts of any person, product, or firm, or inhibit any members, employees from discussing employment with other member companies. Additionally, things you hear during the meeting that are confidential and private to TIA should not be shared publicly without its prior consent or used against or in competition with TIA. Next up, for when you have questions throughout the presentation, feel free to submit those in the comments section in LinkedIn or YouTube, wherever you are viewing this presentation today. Or if you would rather email your question to education@tianet.org with the subject live stream, we will also accept questions that way. After the discussion, we will answer questions from the audience. And if there are none, we will wrap up and look for any questions that might come in after the recording has been posted. So therefore, if you are watching this recording and you have a question, but the event has concluded, please still submit your question in the comments and we will aim to get back to you as soon as possible. If you have any questions about TIA or TIA resources, some of which might be mentioned throughout the presentation today, please contact info@tianet.org for more information. Again, mentioning the recording, when you want to come back to this recording, please come back to wherever you are viewing this, whether that's LinkedIn or YouTube. Wherever you are viewing now, the recording will be posted thereafter. Additionally, you can watch past live streams through the TIA LinkedIn account under the events section and by viewing the TIA YouTube channel and clicking the live section. For more live streams and upcoming events such as this one, be sure to follow the TIA LinkedIn and YouTube channel for similar upcoming live streams, and also visit tianet.org to check out the other member resources and upcoming live streams. With that, Russ, I will add the slides. Is that the correct slide version, sir?
Mm-hmm. So I should be controlling now.
Perfect. And now I will turn it over to our presenters for a short introduction before we move into the content today. Doug, if you'd like to get started.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for attending. And I think this is one of the most dynamic things you will ever see when it comes to available capacity that we have not been using for a very, very long time. Russ Jones, he's the one that started Cargo Chief and a number of other companies. He's a technological genius. And then Jeff Brashear is a lifelong friend over at TIA. He knows more about intermodal and drayage than any other person I've ever met in my entire life. So, and he's still involved in the business with CMA, CGM, and is a wealth of knowledge. I will say this up front. I'm not an intermodal person, but I've learned really, really fast about how much capacity is available out there through private fleets and dedicated fleets and containers that we've just never pulled the curtain back on, because the industry is so fragmented that we never had visibility because there's so many people involved in this business. However, the capacity available out there is millions and millions of cubic feet every day coming from all parts of the United States. So we have good people here to discuss this. And Russ, I'll turn it over to you.
That sounds great. I'm excited to be here. Well, let's take a look at what has been happening, and let's look back a little bit over the last few years. What created the freight recession, the Great Freight Recession, people call it? Well, first, you had COVID come in, made it very hard for people to travel. So no one was going to go visit grandma. They weren't taking vacations. They had extra money. So they started doing remodels, and they started to buy things and do projects around the home. So that meant the demand for goods and resultingly trucks went up. So all sorts of fleets increased their truck counts, which made the number of trucks available after COVID greater than before. Then the previous administration was very loose on the management of all the thousands of trucking schools out there and the other laws that talk about where drivers, and you had a surge of new drivers come in that were unqualified. Then many customers, as post-COVID and in now, are worried about the economy. Inflation's been running hot over the last few years. The economy and the pending recession, people talk about it, have a lot of people pulling back on their spending, and that reduced trucking demand, certainly from where COVID was. And when you have excess supply and reduced demand, that's what creates the recession, and that's what we've all been going through. Doug, what have you seen so far this quarter?
Okay, so back in 2008, 2007, you couldn't beg, borrow, steal a truck. And so back then what we did was, since we had plenty of freight, we went out and we wanted to get carriers. So we went out to the truck stops and we would talk to them, keep the brand visible, Cargomet, keep it visible in the industry. Now what happened is we had the gold rush on COVID. We saw rates go through the roof, demand accelerate, a lot of people staying at home, not going to work, and this, that, and the other. And so the finance companies for the trucking industry saw an opportunity to invest in all these new companies. And with the relaxed enforcement on who was driving a truck, they financed all of these trucking companies. And then post-COVID is when it all started. Historically, over the years, we would come out of a freight recession in 16 to 18 months on the button. This time it took 4.5 years. And a lot of that reason was the people that financed the trucks kept hoping for a return on demand, which never came about. The finance companies then extended terms to allow these trucking companies, and what happened then was they were given balloon payments, and then that year came around, and then the market had not improved. So then they had to start taking all of these assets back. Consequently, going forward, we've seen a lot of major carriers go out of business because, quite honestly, it's been unfair competition. They run by the rules of the land. I mean, they run by the laws, and then these other people were skirting them with invalid ELDs and invalid CDLs. So now where we're at is a place where you've got these companies going out of business. Some of them have 7 times debt ratios, and they're not really in the business or wanting to get back in the transportation sector and start adding new equipment. So where we're at now is with all the new laws that are coming around, all the enforcement, all the media attention. We now have a bullseye on truck safety and safety more so for the motoring public. Just like Derek Barr said the other day at, I believe it was it was TCA. He said that he got a question about the impact would be on cost for freight. And I'm paraphrasing, but he said, I don't really care about the cost. He says, what I care about is the safety of the motoring public. And so I think that's where we're now coming from, the DOT and the FMCSA. On the driver schools, we understand that we've seen hundreds of them already put out of business. We've seen the documentaries, the videos of all of these people that are not qualified to be driving a truck. And essentially they're coming in, some of these guys paying $2,000, $5,000 to get a CDL license that went under the radar without any scrutiny whatsoever, and then allowed them to get on the road. Rates are volatile. Rates are crazy. We all know that. And the fuel just exacerbated our challenges that we have in the freight market right now. What we're going to continue to see, though, I think, is demand for capacity go up for a number of reasons, for the investments in technology, for the investments in data centers, the investment in new manufacturing facilities. And all of these things are going to put an enormous demand on transportation. Maybe not this month, but certainly we will see this by the beginning of Q2.
That sounds great. Well, I appreciate those insights on the market, Doug. So let's talk about what is a private fleet. So I'm picking on Sherwin-Williams because their trucks are blue and very distinctive. And the first thing is that the owner of the cargo, Sherwin-Williams Paint in this example, employs the driver and owns the truck. So that's really what a private fleet's all about. They happen to be in a third less accidents. They're typically newer trucks than certainly a small carrier that would be on a public load board. They're better paid. Some private fleets pay their drivers $100K a year more, which for someone who graduated the 8th grade, that's pretty good pay. The drivers are compliant. They have deep pockets. They don't have any issues. So they're going to have proper insurance. They're going to, have the right the drivers, and the drivers are going to be qualified. They're going to follow all the rules. But they're very hard to approach and arrange. Who is the right contact at Sherwin-Williams or at Walmart or at US Foods or something? And I was surprised when I learned that they are 45% of the trucks on the road out there. Now, their backhauls are mostly empty. I think it's 80% of the time their backhauls are empty. And their priority is their next internal load, their head haul. So if they're going to take someone else's freight on their backhaul, it has to be a precise match. Sherwin-Williams is not going to wait 6 hours for someone else's freight. They're not going to drive hundreds of miles out of their way for someone else's freight. It has to be a precise match. 2/3 of the large fleets have a for-hire authorities. They're looking to carry someone else's freight on their backhauls. They recognize they have all this infrastructure. They have the driver, they have the truck, they have the miles, they're paying for the fuel, and the truck's just running back empty. It's a big deal, and they're typically willing to haul the freight at a discount that would substantially improve the profitability or the net margin for a brokerage. Then there's a whole nother set of trucks that are in dedicated fleets. And what is exactly a dedicated fleet? So a big shipper says, I want 100 trucks. I want you, the carrier, to own those trucks. I want you to maintain those trucks. You hire and somehow retain the driver, which is not trivial in any day, but I get to tell the trucks where to go. And if you get some backhaul revenue, you and the fleet and the shipper will split that. And these dedicated fleets are typically almost all the large carriers, large for-hire carriers have a dedicated fleet, a set of dedicated fleets, or they're even all dedicated. Some carriers are that way as well. And the dedicated fleets are behaving a lot like private fleets. So they're focused on their head hauls and they're mostly empty on their back hauls. Doug, what about containers?
To add to your dedicated fleets there, Russ, I can tell you when we sold the company back in 2006, we had dedicated fleets going through Great Wide. And what we did was I saw an opportunity there because these guys were driving for Walmart, driving for Kroger, driving for all these large companies on the dedicated fleets, and they were coming back empty on all miles paid. So then what I created was a gain share with the shippers that were paying the cost for this all miles. And it took a little for a little while, but then after a few months, actually 4 months, we started bringing in revenue on this. And after 6 months, we'd brought in $6 million in top line revenue at 20% margins, which it was a resource that was underutilized that we got access to. When I started looking at the containers, I had a memory of containers of just being pretty sloppy. You never saw a new set of tires on them. You never saw, you were kind of afraid of them. You'd see brake lines hanging down, this, that, and the other, and they weren't very roadworthy. In 2008, the DOT got tired of that. And so what they did was make the shipping companies not be responsible for these chassis anymore. And essentially it became an enterprise within the United States. You could look at somebody like Direct Chassis Link. They have 290,000 chassis. And on all of those, every one of those chassis, they have multiple maintenance centers throughout the United States. And these chassis run to all points in the United States. And they have state-of-the-art tracking on them. They have monitoring services for the tires, the wheels, the brakes, everything. It is completely different from the way it was in 2010. Now it's 2015. I mean, 2025, and the whole industry has changed dramatically. You now know where these things are. You now know where they're going. But when we have an industry that only has when you have an industry that has around 3,000 drayage 3,000 drayage companies and 1,600 drayage carriers, none of these guys even talk to each other. However, what we do have is about 28 million TEUs that go in and out of these ports on a very regular basis. At any given time, there's 46 million TEUs running in and around the United States. These containers, most of us think that what happens is we go to, they go somewhere and then they go back on a rail and go home. There is a lot of rail traffic, absolutely. 30% of this traffic is rail. But when you look at the major ports like Los Angeles, Long Beach, Oakland, Seattle, New York, New Jersey, Savannah, Charleston, Norfolk, Houston, New Orleans, and Mobile, that's just some of the 300 active seaports. It shows 500 up here. That includes barges and everything else, and rail ramps and everything else. But in actuality, the seaports are in and around 300 on where these containers have to go back to. These containers run into the the middle of the United States. Think of Chicago, Dallas, Kansas City, Memphis. All these guys are running to these destinations every single day. And then for the most part, they did head back to that port. They have to take that container back to that port. When you see the picture of those containers on those ships, those containers have to go back on that ship after they're offloaded. So it is, from what I've seen, it is a tremendous opportunity for us as brokers to look at alternatives that we've never looked at before, because the technology is now providing capacity that's just completely underutilized. And I say we can take these opportunities. I don't care if it's in recycling. I don't care what it is. Some of the cheap freight that you never wanted to haul before, you can look at some of these containers and go to your customers and say, hey, I can save you some money on this with consistent pricing that's going to increase your bottom line revenue. And so this is fascinating. I am so pumped up about this because I think it is a blue ocean strategy for brokers that we've never considered before, and yet it's right out there. When we look at the capacity demands now and the opportunities that we have in underutilized capacity, it is something that we really need to research and get to the C-level of our shippers and say, hey, we can save you a bunch of money if you'll work with us on these containers. 2/3 of all trucks that run up and down the road in 53 footers are only using 2/3 of the trailer. Consequently, that's around 39 feet. And in a 40-foot container, obviously you can get that same amount of freight in that container. I'm not saying this is a one size fits all, but it's certainly a market that has not been used in the way that we could as transportation professionals. I know of one individual, he's sending 3 containers a week from Chicago right back to Vancouver, and he's making very significant margins off of those hauls. And it's just about opening up your mind, forgetting what you thought about capacity and looking at the utilization of underutilized capacity that's right in front of us now. And Jeff Brashears for CMA, I mean, they're loading around 1,400 containers a week, and there's literally millions of them available. Everybody thinks that, and one more thing, everybody thinks that these things run out and back in a local area. It couldn't be further from the truth. These guys are running thousands of miles, literally pulling these empty containers back to the port of entry on all the ones that I listed earlier. It is truly a blue ocean strategy for consideration and brokerage.
That's great. Really good things. Jeff, anything you want to add in, or do you think Doug recapped it nicely?
Actually, I think this is wonderful technology to identify where the containers are sitting. And we obviously at CMA send domestic loads every day to LA, Oakland, Portland, and Seattle. Here you can see where the boxes are sitting and where they're sitting empty, and load one back. And to Doug's point, these dense loads like beer and paper and things like that, the 40-foot ocean container domestic rate is much lower than a 53-foot intermodal container and or an over-the-road trailer.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about blue ocean strategy and creative thinking, I would think of something along the lines of, you've seen those plastic bottles where they have the recycling. They have companies called MRIs, and there's about 30,000 recyclers in the United States, and about 1,200 of them are the actual manufacturers that take those goods, put them into cubes, and then put them on a 53-footer, and down the road they go. My contention would be, I could go to a recycler and say, look, I'm going to give you a 53-foot, I'm going to give you 2 40-foot high cube containers, 80 feet, for the same price of that 53-footer. And these are the kind of things we have to think about when we're looking out for the best interest of our customer. We're all talking about technology and giving all this information, this, that, and the other. But when the rubber meets the road, it's all about cost. Every one of them wants to discuss cost.
Sounds like a great.
I was going to say the two goals are obviously reducing price to your shipper and increasing your margin as a broker. Those are your two goals.
Perfect.
Yep. And this sounds like a great way to combat the increasing rates that we're seeing here in 2026. I think also what's important is you want DFM, not a load board. And what digital freight matching is a center network that brings the buyers and the fleets together and brings those fleets together in a way that's digitally matched. And think of this as kind of like Match.com as an example of digital matching. So one of the keys for the fleets is that they don't want to share. Sherwin-Williams doesn't want the world to know that they're empty from A to B. This is very private. They don't want their competitors to know for sure. So one of the advantages of a digital freight matching platform is that it's very private. The fleet doesn't have to expose to the world their available lanes. They only expose it to the platform, and then the platform does the matching. This is the opposite of platforms like Craigslist, where everyone knows that Mrs. Smith has a beautiful purple couch available for $100. It also helps savvy brokers to not waste time calling carriers and talking about the weather and sports and the March Madness, or the weather that's hot in LA and freezing in Chicago and things like that. And entry-level humans can do some matching, but automation is going to triple the number of matches because it's not going to miss things. It's not going to take a break. It's not going to have a bad day. It didn't have a fight with its lover. DFM is going to be there every day, 24/7. So you all as brokers, your clients see you as the expert. You're the transportation expert. It is on you to find a solution. And this is the checklist that we recommend. First, don't change your workflows. Find a solution that works with your existing workflows. And that requires digital freight matching expertise. Second, make sure that who you're working with has tens of thousands of trucks. We recommend at least 50,000 trucks and 50 fleets, so they have lots of lanes to match to your freight. It doesn't matter if they can't match to your freight, they're not doing anything. Make sure that when you think about your key buying lanes, let's say your top 200 buying lanes, make sure that the platform that you work with can match the majority of your buying lanes. So when you work with them, you're going to see some benefit. You heard what Doug and Jeff were talking about with this incredible network of carriers that's running here, there, and everywhere. Make sure that the platform you're working with matches to container-based capacity as well, not just dedicated fleets and private fleets. Again, Sherwin-Williams needs precise matching. It's not just date or origin, destination, and type of truck. You need the right day. You need the right cargo. You need the right type of freight. You need the right time of day. You need you might have what type of equipment on the truck as well as part of what's going on. So make sure you have precise matching, which means you need at least 15 attributes to a truckload. And then you want to make sure that that they don't just match with one fleet. You want redundant. You want a bench of options for you, because the matching is very precise. And so what looks like a match at first blush, it's not, because the carrier is available from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and your shipper's not ready until 11 a.m. So you need a fleet, you need a bench of options for your key buying lanes, and that will help you to have to enjoy the success of working with these type of fleets. Then, like any tech project, you want this to be you want this to be compelling for you as an investment. You're investing into the tech project. Make sure that the fees are you expect to have at least a 10x ROI, something like that. So for every dollar you give to the tech provider, you're putting $10 in your pocket. That's the type of return you should have. And when you're working with these fleets, a container, dedicated, or private fleets, the benefits you should be expecting are far more a higher quality capacity. We're talking about newer trucks, better paid drivers, compliant insurance, third less accidents, and crisper operations. Savings, we can't be specific, but the savings will probably quadruple your net profit margin. So game-changing savings for you. And third, by filling up these empty assets, whether it's a container or dedicated fleet or a private fleet, you are helping all of us to decarbonize, and that enables you to enjoy, help the ecology of our world. So I think we're through the formal presentation here. We want to leave time for Q&A. Anthony, are there some questions that we should be thinking about?
Thanks, Russ. Right now, we're still waiting for some questions to come in through the audience. We did have one. Why don't Russ and Doug, what are some frequently asked questions when someone first hears about this? I assume, Doug and Russ, we talked about how people know a little bit about this, but it's underutilized, and it takes a savvy 3PL to see, how they can incorporate it. So for someone who's interested, have you had conversations with people who are interested, but they want to know some more things? What kind of conversation? How does that go?
Doug, let me chime in, then you can add on. I think one of the keys is people don't recognize that if you're the broker, it's great to connect with a private fleet, but you really want to connect with 50 or 100 private fleets. And how can you do that in a practical fashion? Your IT team is strapped. You don't have resources to go do 100 integrations. So you want to make sure that you find a platform that can help you do this. The very largest brokers, they're literally buying billions of dollars of truckload capacity. They have a whole team that's dedicated to going out and finding private fleets and dedicated fleets and dray and long haul ocean container capacities. But a typical broker, say $1 billion to $50 million can't. And you want to make sure that you have another point is that you need to understand that you need redundancy. The private fleets, Sherwin-Williams doesn't want to set up someone ABC brokerage to haul one load. They want to set up ABC brokerage to haul a series of loads or multiple series of loads. So you want to make sure that you as a buyer have redundancy and make sure that the platform you're working with can help you discover that redundancy that you probably have. You just may not know about it. Doug, anything else to add on that?
I would say that these private and dedicated fleets, they usually have some of them have a 2-to-1 ratio on their trailers. And then if you have a shipper who is very, very static and consistent with your contract rates that you have with them, and they allow you to drop trailers, the private fleets, dedicated fleets, in containers, they would drop equipment all day long because as we know, the best freight in the world is a drop and hook. And the shippers, not the shippers, but they are shippers, the private fleet carriers, they will work with you all day long if you can just set up these drop and hooks for them. And it's right there for the taking just by getting visibility to these fleets and then talking to them. The other thing too is when you set up a relationship with that dedicated fleet, think about this side of it. If you develop a relationship with them, more than likely they also have freight. Now, if I'm a broker, I've already have a warm lead with this transportation manager because he likes me and I'm loading his trucks. And then all of a sudden he's going to say, Doug, do you ever broker the freight, or could you haul some of our freight for us? There's always one thing that leads to another when we think about these discussions. And the opportunity is vast, but because after you've earned their trust and respect, they're going to give you freight as well. And I think that's just another good opportunity for brokers and what we do.
Let me give you a little back history on Sherwin-Williams. We owned Railvan at the time, and when they set up their private fleet, we had all these customers, think Owens Corning, GE, Heinz, people like that, who wanted to reload their trailers and save money, just like Russ and Doug have talked about, right? Only we have to sit in our conference room and put this all together manually because there's no easy IT facility to see from and to and where the truck is and what we're going to have to pay. And we actually did this manually back in the 90s. I think this is a great opportunity. To Russ's point, there's a lot more focus on ecology now and carbon and all these things. And we have a lot of customers that have to report on it. And there's also a lot of focus, to your point, on saving money. It's always about saving money. So I think the opportunity to use a website where you can reload boxes instead of chase down something on DAT or someplace else, this is a safe mode compared to using any other product right now in the industry.
Yes, Jeff, I think that's a great point. We haven't talked about theft today. My understanding, theft is last year was a $35 billion problem, growing at 24% year over year. I mean, it's a big deal, and Sherwin-Williams is not going to steal your freight. That's a great point.
Yeah, what really changed, I mean, with the visibility to this available capacity that is not being used, we ended up with a bonus with all the fraud that was going on, because essentially we put a geofence around it. And if Sherwin-Williams shows up to pick up your load, then we're pretty sure the load is not going to get stolen or there's any type of problems there. Not only that, the insurance compliance is much higher because these guys are wanting to stay around and remain in business. And then their underwriters are staying on top of driver qualifications as well. And with the visibility that we're seeing now, it's going to get tighter and tighter. One last thing I would add is the insurance companies are now, I was on a call a few weeks ago, and these major insurance companies are now vetting the drivers themselves, because the underwriters do not want to be insuring an unqualified driver. And they're adding language to their contracts with these carriers. And so when you think about this side of it, the private fleets, dedicated fleets, these people are using good carriers. I mean, if you want to be a Walmart driver, it takes you about 6 months to become one, but then you're making 140 grand a year and you don't ever have to touch freight again. And so, Walmart's going to be completely insured. So from that standpoint, it's, and the guys that we work with, think about the brokerage industry. Most of our guys are 10 trucks or less that we work with. And then we can, I've asked numerous brokers, how many of the drivers do you load that are foreign? And some will say 50%, some will say 70, some will say 100. And so I think our driver pool, our truck availability pool is going to be impacted more than anybody else in the industry because of the guys that we use. Because ironically, we're doing what the shipper wants us to, find the cheapest truck out there. And we also agree that we want the truck to be approved by the DOT and the FMCSA. So these things that are happening now, I think it's going to impact brokerage more than we actually realize. And I think it's something that we have to be aware of. And then we have to present this information to our customers as well.
That's a great set of points. It feels very compelling. Anthony, are there any additional questions?
I think Doug wrapped it up well there, but I did want to ask if there were any final comments before we wrapped up today. And gentlemen, if you could let people know where they could find you and ask more questions, that would be great.
Okay, Jeff?
Sort of.
Oh,
I think the one important thing I would say is that when Russ and Doug chased me down at TIA last year, the TIA convention, and actually tackled me on the floor, they were talking about a 53-foot product. And I think Sherwin-Williams, Russ, is really a great example. They're a wonderful company, very profitable, and do very well in the industry. They've been personal friends of mine for a very long time. But the fact of the matter is, I think this is a great opportunity. And I liked it so much that Russ added ocean containers to this to protect our business, which has been very successful. So I would recommend folks getting in contact with Russ and Doug and moving this forward. And Anthony, thank you today, by the way, for hosting our group. I really appreciate it.
I think that sounds good. Doug, how do people get in contact with you?
You can get me through TIA. All of my membership information is out there. I've been a part of TIA since in the 80s, so I've been around a long time. So that's fairly easy to get a hold of me.
Okay, and you can find me at my company's website, which is privatefleetnz.com. We have a form there to set up demos. Or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, or you can email me directly at rjones@privatefleetnz.com. Anthony, thank you so much for bringing us together today.
Thank you, Anthony.
thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. Take
All
care,
right.
everybody. We will see you in the next live stream. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Doug.
guys. Appreciate it. All right.
Appreciate it.
Bye.